Hi, this is Lisa DeMonte from mylegal.com. It's Tuesday, March 23rd, and we've just concluded a three-day conference here at the Georgetown University Law Center. And we're at the conference Law Firm Evolution, Brave New World, or Business as Usual. I'm delighted this afternoon to have with me Anthony Davis, who's a partner at Hinshaw and Culbertson's New York office. Anthony is best described by many as a lawyer's lawyer, and he leads the Lawyers for the Profession practice group at Hinshaw. Anthony, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Anthony, you were part of a panel earlier this morning. We were talking about third-party funding. Are there any kind of ethical or regulatory constraints that the panel discussed today, and how can you help us understand a little bit about the impact of third-party funding?
Can I broaden that?
Sure.
The panel really was addressing all kinds of issues of capitalization, not only of legal profession, not only of broader definitions of legal services, but also funding of individual cases and matters. So that was a part of a context. And both in the narrow funding of particular cases and in the broader issue of capitalization, there are enormous ethical and regulatory issues, at least within this country. The ethics rules and the case law differs from state to state about funding of claims. More importantly, the ethical rules and the regulators in this country have thus far totally closed their minds and eyes to the ideas of outside funding of law firms. On the other hand, those things are both happening with great rapidity and great variety in the UK as a result of the Legal Services Act of 2007, which in the long run is going to create a huge competitive edge for firms that are operating in the UK in many different ways, and is likely to put pressure on the regulatory system and on the ethics rules as they have stood here for a while.
Anthony, do you think that in terms of that outside investment that we're going to see more of investment in law firms, or as Richard Susskind perhaps alluded to last evening, that we're going to see more of the investment in legal services, legal service providers?
I think two things are going to happen. I don't think they're exclusive. I think initially the investment is going to be around the edges, but those edges are going to be very important for law firms because they're going to eat away, they're going to create competition for parts of the services that lawyers have traditionally claimed as their own, which in turn is going to increase the competitive pressure both among law firms and others who would like to provide those services. But I also think that he wasn't talking about one thing that I think is a very important part of the Legal Services Act, which is to open up a door that the American Bar Association thought it had slammed 10 years ago, what the English lawyers now refer to as alternative business structures, and we're not allowed to call multidiscipline practices here anymore. But the fact is that a provision of professional services is going to break down those barriers in the UK, and that is going to be hugely attractive to clients. And so wherever clients are not looking for purely domestic solutions, I think even US-based clients are going to be looking to places not just where they can buy those peripheral services faster, cheaper, better because they've been properly capitalized, but also where they can get counsel in a broader context from broader groups than the US firms are currently structured or permitted to provide.
So if we don't adopt some changes here in the U.S., the U.S. law firms could really be at a distinct disadvantage in terms of competing on a global basis.
On a global basis, yes. I mean, obviously there's going to remain a huge U.S. domestic marketplace for legal services, and there are going to be plenty of lawyers busy for decades to come in this country. But the fact is, the competitive edge that the US firms have tried to garner internationally is going to wither away very fast unless they are permitted or find ways to compete on even terms with the firms in the UK.
Anthony, this conference really revolved around change, the evolution of the law practice. So what do you see as the key drivers of change in the legal profession?
I think in the marketplace at this moment, the biggest driver for change are the clients. I think it grows out of the Association of Corporate Counsel Value Challenge and the training that general counsel have been giving each other about their power in the marketplace and the kinds of ways they should be using that power. I think that's enhanced perhaps geometrically by the downturn in the economy, which has given them new ability to force lawyers and law firms to think differently about the services they provide and how they charge for them. And that in terms is driving all kinds of change within law firms, because if clients say they won't pay for first-year associates, that raises a whole barrier, a whole range of new issues about how you hire talent, how you retain talent, how you train talent, so that you're going to have a law firm in 10 and 20 years' time and still keep those current clients happy and still make a sufficient profit that your partners don't walk out of the door. And then we've talked about globalization and the changes that are going to come from the open regulatory climate, the movement of markets overseas, and of course technology is a huge driver. And technology is a driver in multiple ways. David Wilkins in his last summing up session adverted to this, but so did Richard Susskind, as you said. I mean, ultimately technology is going to impact legal services both in the ways in which lawyers and law firms communicate with each other and internally, the ways they deal with and manage projects, the ways they deal with the other providers when services are broken down by their clients into different components and allocated to different providers, and in the ways they deal with and share knowledge with their clients. So firms that are not responsive or not even proactive in thinking about better ways to use the technologies that are out there are also going to be at a dire disadvantage as time passes.
So we've got, it sounds like there are lots of hurdles to overcome by the law firms to meet these challenges and the changes that are occurring. Can you briefly tell us about those hurdles and what you see as perhaps a solution or a model that some of the law firms might be able to follow?
I think I would summarize the hurdles this way. I think the hurdles lie partly in firms' own intractable structures that are very hard to change. I think they lie in the new competition coming from overseas. I think they lie in the incredible vice that firms are in. On the one hand, clients say we won't pay for first years. On the other hand, the need to retain, to train, to build for the future an appropriate workforce that will carry on the firms. And finally, the regulatory hurdle that I talked about before, I think is a huge barrier for American firms unless ways are found through or around it. And in terms of the model, I think the one thing I would like to say about the future model of the profession is there is no single future model. There are going to be multiple different versions of law firms and of other service providers, not just nibbling at the edges, but doing substantial pieces of what lawyers would like to have thought up until now were purely their domain. So I think we're going to see some big law left, much fewer firms. We're going to see a whole raft of different boutiques. I think in the long run, assuming the British model works, we're going to see alternative business structures with multiple professionals providing services. I think in the interim, the regional firms in the US have a competitive advantage. So I think anybody who's looking for one size fits all is going to be disappointed.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what develops. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today and for your comments and perspectives.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.